Welcome to Jack Theology. My name's Dr. Matt Murphy, and I'm with my friend Dr. Kevin Young.
Good to see you, man.
Uh, Good to see you. Good to be back. 2 weeks in a row.
It is
Keep
2 weeks
this
in a row.
train going.
This is a good run for us here. How you been?
Yeah. Well, between last week and this week, I fractured my ankle, so I'm currently trying to manage around that.
So you jacked up your ankle.
Ja- Jacked up my ankle.
When we say jacked, I don't know that that's what we had in
Yeah.
mind though. But I'm glad you're all in.
Yeah, I'm all in and getting myself jacked. Yeah, you look jacked today. We'll
Yeah, it's lighting. In fact, if you want to look jacked like this, the easiest way to go is just to get good lighting, right? Avoid the gym, avoid the nutrition. Just learn the angles and buy about $2,000 worth of lights, and you're good. Chef's kiss.
Well, that's good insight. There's videos out there. If you search up videos of like those commercials where they say if you just do this 10 minutes a day or take this pill, you too could have these abs. And it is a lot of lighting. I mean, they're fit dudes, and so they actually take the after picture first,
What?
and under good lighting,
Oh
leaned
my
up, nothing
gosh!
in them, and
You're
then they
kidding.
take the before pictures after they bloat themselves. So don't trust those commercials.
So switch
They're
to
fake.
take the before after and the after before. That's it's brilliant, and it almost sounds it almost sounds church like in its ability to just creatively smoke and mirror, deceive, like carnival sideshow. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It sounds like what we do with our numbers, right? Evangelistic numbers. We had 900 baptisms, but 500 of them was the same kid who got baptized every day.
Yeah. Or the old add 10% rule. That was our church's rule.
Yeah,
Because
when
10% of the people are in the bathroom while we did the count.
I won't out the church. I won't out the church that did this. But I've been at a lot of churches, over the years. This was not a church I led. But the church, I found out about a couple of years after being on staff there that their attendance number was not an actual head count. Their adult attendance number was it was an equation based on the number of children in the children's ministry. And so they assumed that every person had like 2.5 kids or something like that. And so they counted the kids, and then their adult number was multiplied by whatever their kids' number was by 2.5. So that was I'm like, what the? Of all the asinine things that I've seen churches do, that's
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, I guess you're getting a metric, and that metric is consistent.
Yeah.
But really, all you're getting is just an extrapolation of the number of kids you have each week by 2.5.
I had a church I led once where, we were averaging a certain amount of attendance, and then all of a sudden there was a drop in attendance by like 15-20%. But the church was small enough. I'm like, that seems weird. Like, it doesn't seem different. Like the same amount of seats every week we're putting out and they're getting filled. Like, it just felt like it was still around the same. And so we realized the drop in attendance happened when the guy who was counting previously had moved away, and he was no longer counting. And so I called him. I said, dude,
WTF?
how are you counting? He goes, yeah, I count the numbers and add 20 or 30 people to it. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, I think because the kids who are in the hall, the people who are in the hallways, the ones who are in the bathrooms, the ones sitting out in the cars because they didn't want to come in, right? I mean it's
anyhow.
Welcome to behind the scenes. With
we call it church math.
Evangelistic accounting, creative accounting.
This week we wanted to talk about an article and then kind of dive into some like where the future of the church is headed. After our conversation last week, it seemed right. And then I ran into this article, and actually I was kind of surprised. I saw it on the Twitter. Somebody had tweeted it
for us.
and I was actually going into it thinking I would fight with the article because of who published it.
Yeah, if you
But
see it up
actually,
there
it
in the
was
corner, right? The Gospel Coalition and the Keller Center.
yeah, the Gospel Coalition, actually in the Tim Keller Center, which got a lot of flack back in the spring.
When it released with a book about orgasms being a the best metaphor for Jesus' relationship with the church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was how
They
kicked off.
started with a very explosive topic. People were coming out of the woodwork just to to just destroy this article. It was top shelf. Okay, I'm gonna stop.
Yeah. If you don't know what we're talking about, go Google Joshua
Yeah.
Butler
Josh
and
Butler.
Gospel Coalition.
Yeah, what was the name of the book? I don't even remember, but it was it'll
I don't know. Don't read it if you
if you're independent fundamental Baptist, don't read it.
yeah, it could be considered erotic.
Could
literature.
be. Oh my gosh, it's yeah.
It definitely is. Yes. But the Keller Center put this article out, and I thought it was really helpful. You know, these researchers did good research. I felt based on reading the article. I haven't read their book, but the initial article here, like you could tell, like they kind of admitted some of their biases and just followed the research, followed the data, which I think is helpful. So I think it has stuff in here for all of us in the church, not just no matter where you're at theologically. I think this was a good article, and I think honestly, Tim Keller, that's what he wanted the Keller Center to be. He wanted it to be something for the whole church, not just those who maybe necessarily fell in line with his Reformed theology. So
yeah, exactly. And I get a little worried whenever the church, whenever religious people poll themselves. But I will say, Ryan Burge, who's behind this study, is fairly well respected. Usually, unless it says Pew or PRRI, I have a huge question mark. But Ryan Burge is pretty well respected. He doesn't always get everything right, I think, in what he sees and what he does, but the data has to be interpreted, and Ryan does a real great job, I think, at just presenting the data the way that it is and putting it out there and letting it do what it will. In this article, I was a little surprised at I disagreed with some of the things I think that they took out of the data, but for the most part, I thought it was pretty well done. I agree with you.
Yeah, so let's dive into it. 5 misconceptions here about dechurching in America. So there is big arguments in evangelical circles, in the broader church circles, about why people are deconstructing or leaving the church, and so this addresses, I think they narrowed down the 5, and I think it addresses probably the 5 biggest discussion points around why people leave.
Sorry about that. There we go. Music again.
That's all right. And so they polled a bunch of people.
Yeah, 40 million, I think is what they said.
Yeah.
Or they're saying 40 million at least left church, but they had 7,000 respondents over 3 phases, 600 data points. Yeah, so it was respectably done, I think.
Yeah. So let's just walk through them. So the first misconception they address is people leave primarily because of negative experiences with the church. I think this comes up a lot. They address the fact that yes, people do leave the church because of bad experiences. I think that's true. And what they found in their data, which actually anecdotally, this is one that I experience a lot too as well. So I wasn't surprised.
This is the one that I'm most interested, I think, in talking with you about. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they said the number one reason people stopped attending the church is they moved.
Right. So it wasn't their negative impression, which is it's said a lot that people. It's said by people who leave the church, oftentimes that the reason that others leave the church is because they had a negative experience. And so I think that is That's something that we say both inside and outside of the church. But yeah. So okay, you agree with their assessment that that's not the reason why most people leave.
Um, well, I would say it has to be nuanced. So while I think people probably, I mean, obviously they're just sharing their data with us. Um, people moved. They had different life changes. Like they also listed in here as part of moving. I would like to see how they define what moving is, but
Right.
in this
Yeah,
article
roughly
they
three
included,
quarters.
you know, people, kids sports activities, family changes, like they got married or divorced, they had a new kid. Um, so life moved for them. I think I would agree with that. And I think, but I would want to dive deeper is why to ask further questions, those folks that didn't come back to church when they moved,
Why?
why was the reason, did you have a
Yeah.
negative experience, you know?
Yeah, I
Um,
wondered,
but
was the moving the easy answer? It's far easier to just say we moved than it is to say it was because of something else. But people who are frustrated with the church, you would definitely think would be willing to out that reason when they're talking to a church group who's doing research. So if people did leave because they were frustrated, you think you'd be willing to communicate that. Um, but I agree. I don't. There has to be a reason behind it, and maybe in the book they go into this. But what's the reason why people didn't feel compelled enough to go back to a church or to go through the work of finding a new church when they moved?
yeah, my experience anecdotally is, I think life the life changes. People just get distracted with lots of activity, and they realize that I don't really need this in my life, or it just doesn't fit right now. We'll get to it someday. Like I think there is some of the folks I've talked to in the sports field, when they find out I'm a pastor, they'll be like, "Yeah, we went to church, and now we're, once the kids got in sports, we haven't gone as much. But I want to get back into it," is kind of what they say. But
Yeah.
it's not a high priority for them. The other things are higher priorities. But even those folks, it's like, well, they lost the ability to see the value in being part of a faith community, and so why
Yeah.
is
No,
that?
yeah.
Um,
And I
you
think
know,
we've spent years telling people that as doctrine, you have to be in church. Oh, unless you're Hebrews 10, 24 and 25, forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as believers. So we've kind of pounded into people this doctrine that you have to be in church and you have to be in community. And that's the only place where you can safely navigate the boundaries of what is within orthodoxy and what is outside orthodoxy. Well, in the back of our heads as churches and pastors, it's because we got to pay the bills and we got to pay ourselves, and we want to be able to pump up that attendance number and baptisms. And I'm not saying that every pastor, that's the only reason why they do it. They don't. But the primary driving factor for having people in the buildings each and every Sunday is not people's relationship with God. It's maybe equal with other things or just under, but it's just not. There are other ways to get people into relationship with God other than sitting in a building on Sunday mornings. One-on-one personal evangelism, small groups, um, you know, interaction on the ball fields. Like there are other ways to accomplish that. So, the church on Sunday morning, it's more than just doctrine, but what we've pressed with people is doctrine and that you have to be together. And people realize that the relationships are only skin deep with those people. And so they get into a new community and they find those relationships in that community more easily and more quickly on the ball field and in the neighborhood and in the kids' school events. And there's just not enough time to go through the hassle of forming that community with a new church who the worship isn't what it was. The preaching wasn't what it was, better or worse. The kids' experience wasn't what it was. And the only thing that we've compelled them for the reason for doing it is because they have to. What am I going to get in return? I already know Jesus. I already am a person of faith. I'll do it next week. And then next week they say, I'll do it the following week. So I think as a church, we've really not promoted the most important things, and we're losing people. But we're not losing people to faith. And another one of these misconceptions say that these people are still people of faith. Um, yeah. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I well, I think you hit on it. I think a big reason is, especially evangelical churches have tended to want to be like Disney World. They like model themselves after a place like Disney World. Um, and so like people are, so we've lost the ability in the church and to bring people into the presence of God. We've forgotten that's like part of why that's our calling when we gather is we enter into God's presence. Where two or three are gathered in my name, there I am also. Like, and so bringing people into God's presence is a call of the church. And so the church is over the years has become like this community center, these relationship building things, and then like you said, people realize, well, I can find it better in the community. I can find that easier. Like the church is just another. I don't need more friends. I hear that sometimes. I don't need more friends, and so why do I need to go to church? And so some of the value of what we've pitched as a reason to come to church has been lost
Yeah.
because the world, quite honestly, does it a lot better than we can.
Yeah.
And
Well, and we've
so,
spent years, Matt. We've spent years telling people it's not about programs and buildings. It's not about programs and buildings. Years. It's not about programs and buildings. It's not about programs and buildings. And then COVID happens, and then people start leaving, and now it's about programs and buildings. It's about programs and buildings. It's about programs and buildings. We've spent
yeah,
decades telling people, no, it's about relationships. It's about small groups. It's about being in your communities. And now we're like baiting and switching them. And
yeah. No, I think, yeah, I think we've got to get back to the heart of what the church is for. So, like, to take a business model, it's like, well, like, what's my niche in the market that people are going to want and desire my product? And I think the church has to think about that. Like, we can't just do what everyone else is doing,
yeah.
and I don't think we're called to do that. And so we have to be different. We have to offer something
Yeah,
different.
it can't be because
And I think
the book
going back,
tells me so. It can't be because Jesus requires it. For most people, that's not motivation enough. And I cut you off, but it's
no,
also, we can't shouldn't duplicate things that the community is already doing. Um,
yeah, yeah. I mean, be present in those places as the church. I think that's what we see the early church doing. They're present in those spaces. But the early church, Jesus offered something different, and I think the church has to get back to that, offering something different.
Compelling,
And
different. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So misconception number two, um, which I laughed at this because I agree with
This one
this
had to be hard to
completely.
admit. This one had to be hard to admit
Yeah,
when they saw it in the research.
especially the conservatives, right?
Yeah.
So
In fact,
these are
I'm guessing it was the biggest revelation in the study to these guys, but they had to put it at number two because even they had such difficulty admitting it is the number one
yeah,
misconception. Because so much rolls out of this.
yeah. So misconception number two: young people are leaving the church after attending secular universities.
I love this. I love this. I love this. If I if I weren't asked, which I kind of am, but if I really were one, I would have just this paragraph like cut and paste onto a huge, enormous banner. And there are a few churches I would go and put it in the ground in front of in my community.
The data only only 3% of evangelicals with graduate degrees were dechurched. And then they
Wait,
said
I want you to say. I want you to say that again. I don't want us to miss that.
only 3% of evangelicals with graduate degrees were dechurched. But the
So,
highest amount of dechurched were those who were uneducated with less education.
so this
Um,
is like completely 180 degrees opposite of what, especially conservatives, conservative politically and conservative theologically, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but have really taken this up as a talking point against whatever in their mind is progressive thinking. And so it's been used both to kind of hammer folks who think differently or believe differently, but also to rally the base of support among those who prefer homeschool, private, liberal arts education that's Christian centered, to really kind of talk and speak against the influence of progressivism, of Democrats, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, have said that they are destroying the faith and pulling people away from church. And yet, what they found, correct me if I'm wrong here, and what you just said, is that the most churched people who remain and don't follow the trend of falling away are people who are going to those progressive, liberal, secular universities for education, and people who are more educated no matter where they end up being educated. So it's like a double whammy of wrongness in that if it's a secular, progressive, liberal arts education, it keeps you in, and just being more educated rather than less educated keeps you in.
Yeah, it kind of destroys the whole argument that a lot of the more conservative fundamentalists argue. And I saw a video clip of Mark Driscoll today. Actually, somebody posted talking about how our public education system is what's driving people away from the church, and this data says it's not, um, which is fascinating. And so that they get on this high horse, and they're wrong. And in fact, actually, their way is actually the data is showing is what's leading people away from the church, um, which is fascinating. It should be encouraging, actually, that the whole adage that teach a child the way they should go when they're young and they will not depart from it when they're older. Like, we should trust the process of discipleship in the home, and then as our children and we go out and learn and learn new things, and our faith is challenged, like, we got to trust that the Spirit of God will keep it solid, right? Through that process. And I know it can be scary for parents, and I think that's probably what it is, just a fear. And so, but the fear is actually what's driving people away from the church.
Yeah, it's a
Which is,
self-fulfilling prophecy.
I,
Yeah.
I I giggled when I read this article. I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah. Um, and
I
so,
screamed, I shouted. Why is that? I mean, I think you're right. I think there are multiple reasons. The truth comes out eventually, and most people at some point or other in life are confronted with truth. And if you're in that insulated bubble of dishonest, dishonesty about science, dishonesty about what progressives believe, what liberals believe, dishonesty about what the Bible actually says, especially in regard to cultural issues, and what it doesn't necessarily say concretely in regard to cultural issues, the opposite perspectives and the strength of the argument on the opposite side of yours versus what you were told the strength of the argument was on the opposite side of yours. If you find and discover those things out at the age of, your late 20s, your 30s, when you have kids, in your 40s, and you kind of had that aha moment that maybe what you were fed was partially or largely not true, that has a real different effect than you having that happen when you're 17 or 18 years old. When you're in university, when you're 21, 22 years old, you have a lot more grace, for, I think, your church, your family of origin, your church of origin, when you're still malleable, brain wise. 25 is the age of that. So I think when you're under 25, you have a lot more grace for the dishonesty because you're still in a mode of discovery, and things have not yet set. And so you want to know the opposite side, and you want to know that people were being honest with you with what they said. But you get past the age of 25 where your brain is set more in concrete and your thinking doesn't change anymore. You find out that your professors in your Christian university lied to you about evolution, or were dishonest with you, or withheld key information that they knew but would make you question what they thought. You're going to have a whole different perspective of that if you've been lied to by people with doctorates and people whom you respected as pastors in your 20s and 30s, who knew. And I just think that this is probably part of it, is the timing at which people receive the alternate perspective from the one they hold, no matter which side of the spectrum you're on, helps you wrestle that to the ground and maintain faith, rather than if it happens much later, I think it is much more difficult to hold on to faith because there's a lot of anger in those days.
Yeah. So I think, especially in this culture, allowing people to learn other ways of thinking, other views of theology is probably a healthy way for people to keep their faith long term. And um, I think this data shows that out. Um, I think too, one of the things I saw, actually saw some conservative folks backlashing this article based on this
Okay.
point here, saying that, well, the reason why more conservative, uneducated folks are falling away from the church is because the church is becoming more liberal. The liberals are taking over, which I found fascinating.
The data
Um,
doesn't bear that out.
so
Doesn't
um,
the churches? Maybe they're maybe the ones that are moving in the direction of becoming more open-minded or progressive and allowing
well,
there to be multiple interpretational possibilities on a text. Maybe they're moving in that direction more strongly, but the ones who are also conservative are circling the wagons and moving more conservative as well. The middle is disappearing, not growing.
yeah.
People, uh, conservative churches aren't moving liberal, and liberal churches aren't moving conservative. But the people in them who may
Well,
be
I
are
think it
leaving
leads
those
to,
churches.
yeah, I think people are leaving and going in different styles of churches. I mean, I'm an example of that. I left the more classic evangelical churches, and now I'm in a more mainline Protestant type church. So
I
I
would
think
say they
you're
left. I
seeing a
would say
lot
they
of
left
that.
you, Matt. Knowing your journey, I would say they left you knowing so many denominations. You know what, and we talked about this when we talked about evangelicalism. Most of our denominations and evangelicalism in general was founded to be a big tent mentality, and the boundaries in the tent has grown smaller and smaller, especially since
Yeah,
COVID, especially
that's
since
fair.
Trump,
Yeah,
especially since Black Lives. And so that,
yeah,
I think that in a lot of ways, yeah, maybe you changed and grew in your thinking, but a lot of these denominations and evangelicalism encouraged that and allowed that historically, not so much anymore. A lot of denominations and evangelicalism in general are leaving people rather than people leaving them. When you
that
when
yeah,
you when you make
that's a
that
good
boundary
point. Yeah,
smaller,
yeah,
um, the people who are standing in the outer areas of that are then excluded. The smaller that you make the circle,
yeah. And it's unfortunate because a lot of these denominations, started as, big, like
as
you said, big
missions,
tent.
as a big tent, yes, reaching
Yeah,
out to other people. That
yeah,
was how they grew and became great, was by including people who had been excluded from other places, who felt like they had no place somewhere else. And ragtag bunches found a place inside of these denominations who were less who had some doctrinal things obviously that were concrete for them, but most of them were founded around mission, were founded around doing, and will draw the doctrinal tent as wide as we can and hope to convince you, but you're one of us if you will be on mission with us in what we're doing, whether it's hospitals or whether it's Skid Row or alcoholism or back in the prohibition area, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
that kind of leads to the next point,
All right, let's
which
do it.
also is funny. Number three, which I think conservatives have a hard time with this too. Uh, People leave the church because they've left the faith.
So wait,
I
now I
hear
want to
so much.
remind that that's a misconception, that people think
Yeah,
that
misconception.
they're saying that people leave the church because they left the faith, and that many of us think people leave the church because they leave the faith, but the study found that's wrong.
But 98% would still agree that Jesus is God and haven't left the faith. So 98% of people have left the church, are no longer attending church, are saying they still believe in God. They have not left the faith. Which, if you follow any conservative talking about deconstruction, Matt Chandler was famous for saying that, like, people just leave the church, become evangelicals, and deconstruct because they just want to have sex with people or whatever. They want to sin. uh,
I swear,
actually is not the case.
evangelicals, all they think about is sex.
It's like
Everything comes back to sex.
it's like I the amount of times I've heard that. If I had $1 for every time I heard that argument, I'd be a really wealthy man. And here, the data is showing actually that's not why, right? We still believe in Jesus. We still follow him. We just are not going to go to your thing.
And you see that first. I think it's really funny
Yeah,
that they point out that people who leave the church still roughly in large numbers confess the Nicene Creed. I just think it's funny that it was the Nicene Creed that was their standard, not the Apostles' Creed. So the first thing there was like
yeah,
you already took, the Apostles' Creed is a generally accepted bar for the lowest bar of orthodoxy, but a bar. For orthodoxy, and the Nicene Creed, which came along later, was dealing with other things and is a little bit more intense about what is in the creed and what is a requirement kind of to be in alignment with the creed. So it wasn't even like they took an easy bar to say that these people who are walking away from the church, who are de-churched, are still church. No, they set the bar higher than what would probably be acceptable and normal by making it the Nicene Creed, and people still by and large, what was it you said, 97, 98% or something passed that bar. So it's not just a majority, it's everyone. And anytime you interact
yeah,
with people who have walked away from church, who identify as an ex-evangelical, like it or not, these people are running circles around everybody else theologically. These are the smartest people, the sharpest people, the ones who had the doctrine most embedded with them. They weren't leaving that doctrine by some do. Yeah, some do. Mostly because they can't stomach the people who hold to it. It's not even about the doctrine, but if they abandon the doctrine, most of the time they're not walking away or didn't want to walk away from a belief in the doctrine. It's just dishonest to say that they did.
yeah. This one was fascinating. I think a lot of conservatives we're going to have a problem with this one. And I think this one actually, for me, it confirms a lot of what I thought anecdotally, um, and why I kind of thought we should talk about this, because there's so many people out there that still affiliate with Jesus, serve Jesus, follow Jesus, that aren't connecting to the church. And it's like, why and how can we do church differently to draw them in? And actually, they kind of teased that in their last one. We'll get to that in a minute. But the fourth misconception is, we talked about this on misconception number 2, but that misconception is that people are leaving primarily on the secular left, which they found wasn't true. That the secular left isn't leaving the church, which is fascinating. I think part of it for me, now that I'm in a mainline denomination and I actually interact with a lot of people on the secular left, that are in churches, leading in churches. I don't think not the thing. They don't worry about all the little things that conservative churches worry about doctrinally. So they're not getting in big fights about stuff. They just have decided this is how it is. This is how we're living. And they're more concerned about actually like social justice issues and things like that, and getting out in the community and helping people. And so when I'm in conversations with them, like, we're not talking about predestination. We're not talking about arguing about like penal substitutionary atonement. Like, they're so far like ingrained in who they are as people of God and what they're supposed to do, that they're debating and dialoguing around like, how do we live like Jesus in the community? And those are the conversations that I hear. And so I could see why they're less likely to leave, because they're not worried about all that stuff, and their commitment level is super high to just
Yeah.
serving, and that culture is there.
Yeah.
Whereas
yeah. Well, they
the
get,
conservative,
they get called cultural, Christians are just following the culture. You let anything happen. Nobody changes their theology more than traditional conservative theology people. I mean, what you have to believe in order to be in the group changes almost weekly in conservatives, and do you see changes in progressive and liberal thinking, yeah, you do. But those changes, in my experience, are marked in decades rather than in weeks. Um, Inerrancy was once something that was hugely important to evangelicals and conservatives, and then a whole bunch of churches started having a conversation about gay people, and then well, you have to agree with us on this, and then it's nuanced, and you you don't have to practice, or if you can't practice but you can still be saved. Well, it changed. Okay, well, then that died down, especially after the AIDS crisis, and we're back to inerrancy, and then it's women pastors, can women be pastoring? Well, then it's, oh, well, what about the T? What about transgender? Oh, well, now you have to believe this, Matt Chandler, human sexuality, unless you agree with us on this, then you're not only are you not evangelical, you're not even a Christian. And now we're back to women pastor. I mean, women in ministry again. And the transgender thing is like old news. Well, now it's mutilating children. And it's, it is the flavor of the day, and oftentimes they'll use the word zeitgeist, you cultural Christians who aren't conservative MAGA folks, it's the zeitgeist, whatever the latest thing is, right? Y'all, in the last 6 months, you've had 3 different things that had to be a requirement for salvation, and it never was before, and you don't even care about 2 of those anymore. It's chaos.
Yeah. When you draw so many lines in the sand, eventually you're going to just cut people off. So yeah, I think that's a big reason why. Like we've talked about it. The smaller circle gets, right,
Yeah.
the more
If
people are
everything
left
is
out.
important, nothing is important.
Yeah.
If
So
everything is a
eventually everybody
requirement
gets.
for salvation, then nothing is a requirement for salvation, and nobody gets saved. If everything is a
Yeah.
requirement to get into heaven, then there are no requirements to get into heaven, and nobody's getting in. If everything, that it just, come on, Sorry,
No, yeah,
my blood
it's
pressure
the
is up on this
problem,
sweating. But the
and
people,
that's probably like. Well, that's probably
and
like one of the reasons.
so
Sorry, go
no, it's just
ahead.
so many Republicans, so many conservatives, so many people in our churches, no matter where your political affiliation is, they're just tired of it. They are tired of having to care this week about what everybody cares about this week. And so many of us who were very conservative, who were ultra fundamentalists in our thinking, at some point you just get tired of having to care about whatever it is that has to be cared about today. And you eventually start reading your Bible and thinking the Bible does not in any way, shape, or form raise this to the level of seriousness that you're making it. And at the end of the day, you've got like 10 things where you realize the Bible does not necessarily raise to the level of seriousness the way that you are doing this, and you throw your hands up in the air and you say, I've had enough of this. Just let me go serve in a homeless shelter somewhere. Let me go out on a ball field and have some peace in my life with other people my age and watch some kids hit some sports balls around. And this is why I think the misconception is that all the liberals are leaving the church. They're not. It's the strongly dedicated, theologically sound people who are just done with the drama.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the point one of people are leaving because they moved, and I think it's really like they're just done with that drama. They're done with
And they probably
seeing.
intentionally move. We're
Yeah,
never going to get away from y'all.
hypocrite.
We're just leaving. Johnny can find
Yeah,
another sports ball team, and and Mama can find another job somewhere else coaching. We got to get away from this church. I don't know.
oh yeah, I'm sure
maybe
some people
they're
do that.
moving to get away from y'all.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and so then point 5, which was encouraging. It's the misconception is that they aren't willing to come back. Those that have left the church, and so here they found that actually in the survey that nearly 80% of folks said they'd be willing to come back to church. And they said people are looking for healthy relationships, and that the local church actively demonstrates how the gospel is true, good, and beautiful. So I think
Yeah, I think when I was
Yeah.
looking at this though, Matt, I was really looking for some key indicators that they actually got what I think to be um, the issue here. And I think, you know, okay, let me just highlight this. When they talk about thinking about bringing people back, they used in that first sentence, these two factors are almost entirely within our control. I know what they mean by that, but just this idea of control. The church, it reinforces this idea that people can be controlled, that metrics can be controlled, and it presents this idea that a church can do something or change something in order to manipulate or move people. And I know I'm reading a lot into that, but the word control is a mindset that is embedded into the foundations of the problem that created this to begin with. Even in the second sentence, church leaders can grow in there, but that word grow is a word that is just laden with baggage about what health looks like is numbers. When they say that, relational wisdom to build healthy communities. And I know what they're talking to, but their minds are still embedded deeply in the problem. And our local churches can grow institutionally. The word institution there in that sentence about this problem about people will come back. They're not coming back to churches who use words in their verbiage like control or grow or relational wisdom or build health. Like
Yeah.
that language, that doesn't resonate with people anymore because they know what that means. And what's the first thing that they list that we can be bolder about and clearer about? Doctrine.
Doctrine.
Go read your other four misconceptions, idiots.
Yeah.
Religious affection. What the hell does that even mean? And cultural engagement. We see how you engage culture, and we're moving away from you because of how you engage culture.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just like
Yeah. Yeah.
on this one, I was just like, this is the saddest one to me because it is true. Those people, by and large, who have walked away from church communities deeply want to be back in a church community. It's not yours.
Well, this is where the gospel coalition culture is coming out in this paragraph. Um,
All right,
they
yeah,
had to.
I'm
I
gonna I'm
mean,
gonna I'm gonna hit mute on my mic now. All right, go.
they 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 had to do this. They had to put this in there. But it's fascinating because their data is showing that this conservative way of looking at the church is actually what's driving folks away, and yet they're not willing to ask the hard questions. They just want to look. Maybe we just need to do what we're doing better, make it more clear, but we're not going to change what we're actually doing. And I think fundamentally, the church has to change. And so I think they missed that here. Yeah, they clearly missed that. Like that. No, these people are going to come back to the same thing. They're not
Yeah,
stupid.
yeah. Do what you're doing, but
So
do it better and more intentionally. No, no.
no.
Stop doing everything you're doing. Literally everything you do is wrong. Literally 100% of it. Like 120% of it is wrong. I,
Yeah, yeah. It's
just
so
stop. Just stop. Just close the doors to the church for 6 months or a year, and just go be in your community. Don't talk about Jesus.
so yeah.
Don't open your mouth about the Bible. If somebody asks you about your faith, pretend you're demonic, and just listen. Just be in your community and just be around people. On it, like this is the advice that I'm like at the point of giving to pastors. You have to detox and be detoxed from all of the shite that has been you've been pouring into your mouth and your heart for years, and we will do more good for the kingdom of God and for the communities that we're in if we would just stop, just stop for a while and learn
Yeah,
and listen and wait in silence. I like 40 years in the wilderness, like for so many people who are evangelicals, that story is hard to believe because it's like, okay, it's like a 4-day journey. Like they weren't lost in the wilderness. They knew where they were. This can't be. The wilderness had so gotten into their hearts, in my thinking of that story, that it took 40 years, to get Egypt enough out of them in order for them to be able to see to see God again. And I feel like this is where so many churches and pastors are. There is so much Egypt in our hearts and our lives and the processes and the way that we do things that unless we literally just stop for 40 years and do nothing, um, we'll never be effective again because we just and this is what evangelicals and guys like you and I are shouting from the rooftops. And some folks are seeing it. They are, but it's
Yeah,
tough.
I enjoyed this article till this part. It was disappointing um, because it's like you're not listening. It's clear. Uh, the data is showing that those that are left the church are crying out for something different, something new, something honestly more authentic, more like Jesus, more organic than what the church is. They're done with the machine. They're done with the show. They're done with your doctrine and who's in, who's out, right? Um, so yeah, like so, where do we go from here? I think your point you were making is a good first place to start. Is just to be present in your community as a believer. Like you know, don't not reflect Jesus, but yeah, don't go preaching. Just go listen. I love that. Just love people. As you listen, you can learn to love where they need to love the most. And then as you listen, you can then enter in and provide opportunity for people to then live in the kingdom of God. One of the things that I feel like works is like inviting people to be like Jesus without saying it like that. But um, I had an opportunity last night. Like I serve and I'm just trying to be present in the community, like you said, and just listen. Um, and so one thing has led to another that I serve on two boards. I serve on our local YMCA board, and then my kids' swim team board, which is part of the YMCA. And things just came together where, like, I'm leading a project where we're gonna like provide basic items for unaccompanied minors, refugees that are coming to our area from like the
It's
Ukraine and
awesome.
Iran and different places like that. And so I got last night basically 100 people from the community, all different faiths. I got to give them a vision for what Jesus is like and how to serve those refugees, and gave them a real tangible way to participate. Um, and I didn't use Jesus. I didn't use that language. I just like showed them how we can love and how we're called to love, how we're called to serve. And man, people were so excited. I had so many cool conversations after. Um, but if I would just went in as Pastor Matt, as a preacher guy, like none of that would have happened. They probably wouldn't even wanted to do this thing. But because I was there, I'm one of them. I've been present for a while. Um, I'm able to do that. And so I think I had a glimpse last night when I was leaving that. I was like, oh, this is like the future of evangelism or the church is we're just inviting people to do what Christ is already up to. But not like overwhelming them with all that, religious language. Cause I in that room I had, there was Jewish folks, there was Muslim folks, there was people who hate any religion. I mean, it was just a smorgasbord of faith, but they all got captured in this vision of to be like Jesus for these children. So it was cool. So I think that's a big piece. Um, what else?
Yeah, I'm outside so many of those conversations now in the church and thinking, and I don't know for how long that will be. I feel like I've both been blessed and cursed with being outside of institutional church, and it's given me this perspective that I just am thankful for it, and I also don't know how long it will last. Because for better or worse, I'm an insider, even though I'm on the margins, and I don't think I'll ever be fully an outsider. I haven't wrestled with the things that a lot of other folks who've walked away have wrestled with. I haven't been harmed and traumatized by. I have been, but not by the same things that a lot of folks have. My journey is different, and I've been an insider. and continue to kind of be one. And so I think that even where I sit, I said listening, but I think, one of the things that is hard is for us to truly form relationships and listen to people without it being a sales pitch, without being the used car salesman who's doing it in order to get something, to get a salvation, to get a relationship, in order to get somebody to change in their life. And I find myself even today struggling against doing that and not really, really listening and just sitting with people where they are without any other intent other than to just know them. If at the end of the day I know more about them, can that be enough? Is that enough? And what do I need to know? Even where I sit now, I go into coffee shops here, and we're now living in the deep South, and everybody goes to church. And literally, they don't just say it, but they do. And I go into coffee shops, and I see, that every time I go into a coffee shop, there are 3 or 4 groups in every coffee shop. That's a church staff meeting. It's a small group meeting. It's to, people doing discipleship with each other. And it just makes me want to throw up. It does. I now avoid coffee shops because I can't stand it. It hurts my soul to see what the church is doing and what the church is perpetuating inside the bubble of itself, because it doesn't know the way it looks and sounds to people like me. You can not even be having a conversation with somebody who is far from God or who is questioning or having struggles with the church, and you're still harming them by the way you're continuing to act. I think, I'm now of the opinion that more people get harmed by getting coffee at Starbucks, secondary shrapnel, than people who walk into churches. Because now I'm one of those people who are disconnected and experiencing that. So I think self-awareness and doing whatever you can to understand how you're perceived and how what you do and say is perceived. And the only way to really do that for most of us is to form non-religious relationships with other people who aren't religious, or maybe who were, and there be no hope or goal whatsoever of ever outing yourself as a religious person, and certainly no goal or hope of changing them. And maybe, just maybe, God will bless and they will be honest, deeply honest with you about what they think and feel about you or your church or your theology. And pray to God that if that moment is ever blessed on you, you're given the ears to actually hear what's said.
What would you say, as I listen to you? I feel that too. I feel I'm definitely disconnected from the evangelical machine. Obviously, I'm still in a organization, a church organization, but very much not evangelical. And so I've had that experience too, where I hear church groups, or I could tell it's a total evangelical conversation, and it feels very awkward for me. Even like when I interact with some of my friends who are still part of evangelical churches and hang out, like some of the stuff they say to me used to be normal language, but then I'm like, I catch myself like, wow, that's really weird. um, and so can you pinpoint like what that awkwardness is, like what the language is, maybe like what is that that's kind of a turn off?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I kind of reflecting, because I think maybe what I need to do is maybe do some more self-assessment in those moments over the coming weeks. My first thing that came to mind, and I don't know if I stand behind this or not, but my first thing that came to mind whenever you said that was, it's so often not what is said, but it's the nonverbals. It's the way they carry themselves. It's the way they interact. And I think lack of awareness of their surroundings in which they're in. Oftentimes they're loud. Oftentimes they're large. You and I had this experience when we were in Great Britain, whenever we were on our study summer in Great Britain for our doctorate. we would go into a coffee shop, a group of what, 6, 7, 8 guys, and just do what normal Americans do: have a conversation, laugh, drink. And they hated us because they were quiet and reserved, and we were dominating the room in a way that they could not avoid. And this is what happens in Starbucks and in these coffee shops is,
Mm.
and I think it happens in so many conversations in politics, in religion, in neighborhoods, at ball fields. Christians have a tendency to be so self-confident and so considering themselves as being the most important person in the room with the most important message in the room, that we just suck all of the air out of the room and dominate in our voice, in what we say, and how we interact and communicate with people, and how we don't understand how people are watching us and saying, even just by the way, the guy, and I'm thinking of a group a couple of days ago who were on ministry staff, even just the way that they sat, like in relation to each other, just was like sprawled out in chairs, large, I mean, the books in front of them, the hands, like it's just this
There's
huge,
arrogance.
yeah, arrogance
Yeah,
and ego. And other people were
yeah.
watching this, who the hell are you? Other business people who are having meetings don't act this way. Other folks who are friendships in a conversation, like they're aware of the people around them and are respectful. There's just, it's a vibe.
That's
It's a vibe. It's the
yeah.
words, but it's a vibe. It's a vibe.
I think that's a good point because we do in the church teach that, like that we're the most important person in the room. Really, they need to hear what we have to say. Yeah, and I think that's good. That's good insight. I think the arrogance is definitely there. Like we're gonna do this our way. We're gonna have this conversation.
Yeah,
The
and
Spirit's
I
with
don't think a
us.
lot of people are arrogant. I think maybe they are.
Well, it's
Okay,
the
let me say that.
culture.
But I'm not going to automatically assume that everybody who I meet in a Starbucks here in Birmingham who's a Christian is arrogant. I think probably per capita, the Christians are the most arrogant group, but not all of them are, and I can't say that. I don't know that, but I think we have an arrogant message.
Yeah,
Okay, I think
it's
this
cultural.
idea of Christianity is an arrogant message if we don't understand the real message of the gospel, that it is good news, and what that good news
Well,
means.
we have to
And so I
learn the
think
foot
even
washing part
arrogant
of.
people, even non-arrogant people, end up being arrogant because of what they think the message of Christianity and the good news of Christianity is.
Yeah, yeah. The person might not necessarily be arrogant, but the culture is. So they reflect that culture. I think is what it is. And yeah, I think we got to learn who Jesus actually was. Jesus was the foot washer. Jesus laid down his life. He tells us to take up our cross, not to be first, right? To be last. To be. He uses all this language, and so we have to remember that and start culturally living that out. What I see, it's similar but a little different. Um, I hear all the cliche statements. Those are what really bother me and really like take me back. And I think those cliche statements are don't line up. They're not authentic. They don't line up with who the person really is. And I think the world around us sees that. Like, no, you're not really like that. Come on, like. But the persona we put on is that we're this perfect person that Christ has like made us white as snow, that we no longer sin anymore. And there's this it's part of its arrogance, but I think what I see is it's very inauthentic. Um, it's not human almost. It's not like you almost lose your humanity in a lot of that. A lot of the things that we evangelicals will talk about, um, and when people hear that, it doesn't, and especially if like your neighbor, your friend you grew up with, who's not part of the church, knows you really well, right? And they hear you talk like that, it's like, and they're not going to then engage in that with you. So I think for me, like the authenticity, I think it's just not authentic. It's not an
Yeah,
authentic culture.
I was
Um,
I was at Starbucks, but last week, okay, and this church group is there, and there's this guy who's, he's got the posture. He's self-confident. He's telling about his story, and I'm one chair away from these folks. I can't. I have my headphones on, my noise canceling headphones, and I can still hear them through the noise canceling headphones with music on. So he's talking about a story, and he's at this certain church in the area, and he was in this position, and they wanted to move to another, and he wasn't sure, but they did, and he wanted to go to Southern Seminary in order to get his doctorate, but he ended up not doing that, so he stayed there, and he did really well and doing ministry there. He's a college guy, man, it grew. The girls just loved me, and things just grew, but then they decided to move me. Like, totally, I was like, I looked over, I was like, what the where the hell did the girls just love me come in? And I looked over at him and I was like, they might have loved you at 21, but at 26, you're not as much of a catch as you think you are. And I'm not even sure you were then. And what the hell pardon me, but what the hell are you doing in a meeting with other ministry people bragging on how you look and using it as a leverage as to why your ministry grew? If I'm an outsider, I'm an insider in the church, and I hear that. And if I had any, if I almost called the church up and asked for the pastor and said, I know you know this because you're probably wired the exact same way, because this is a trend, this is a pattern, and
yeah,
you're heading for a sexual abuse allegation.
Well,
at some point,
you hear that with
this guy.
A lot of pastors let that stuff slip. Our friend Christopher Lapp would say there's so much sexual tension in evangelicalism that it just like leaks out, right?
Yeah,
and it's so true.
Just go masturbate. You're killing us. But it just and you're right. It is embedded in the culture. It is baked into the bread of what it means now many times to be these churches, and this is why they're doing all these studies about misconceptions, or trying to figure out why people are leaving, and most of them still continue to fail to see why it is, because young buck with a beer gut now still thinks that he's got it with the ladies, and that's why he grew to begin with.
Yeah.
I nearly came unglued and said something, and Matt, you know me well enough to know. If I would have said something, nothing else would have ever needed to have been said to him, because I would have made sure that it landed.
Yeah.
But I was like, Kevin,
that
it's not your monkeys, it's not your circus.
Yeah, there's groups of people that think they put people in place because they think they are good looking. They're going to attract the guys and the gals, or the gals and the guys will come because the gals are there.
And everything was it was just everything was arrogant. I think that's the word, and maybe that's the word that we end on today. I think you're right. All of these center around an ongoing arrogance that just continues to be perpetuated and reinforced, and until we understand that we're not what we think we are, we're not supposed to be who we are, and that we're not seen how we think we are by the people we're trying to minister to.
I mean, we've got to get back to our humanity. Be real, be honest, be authentic. I think two things sum it up before we start talking about fitness, is be present, listen, and then work on your heart, the arrogance in the heart, learn to be more human, more authentic, more real. I think those two things, if the church could start to do that, I think we got something, and I think people will start to re-engage again. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good
discussion.
word. That was good, man.
Yeah, it was fun
I
times.
get a little heated. I get a little heated a lot. Sorry about that.
No, I was good. Uh, we I liked it.
Yeah, just hit my play button, right? I know.
Yeah, start yelling at the TV.
Yeah, yeah. So the ankle, how are you like? Has that just completely destroyed your, your fitness stuff? Or are
uh,
you working around it?
I've been
What's I
working
would be I
around
would be
it.
go, I would be going crazy. I've had an injury or 10 over the
Yeah,
that was a pretty, you take out the legs. That's a
it's
lot
tough.
of the movements. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I've been doing. I did well. I heard it on Tuesday. Um, so I got good workouts in Monday and Tuesday. And Wednesday, I didn't. I just laid around all day. And then the last 2 days, I went into the gym and did different things. Worked around it. Um, so yeah, I think it's good. Just keep moving, keep the blood pumping. Yeah, I can't do the squats. I can't do the cleans and all that. I can't do a lot of this stuff, but there's plenty I can do. So just want to stay consistent. So I told my coach at the gym, I said, hey, so he's been writing me some stuff, and last 2 days has been good. So yeah,
Are
I
you going
think
to
the
be able
key
to
is,
are you going to be able to do it without keeping it from going insane?
oh, I'm going to go insane. I'm already going insane. My wife was chewing me out for taking my boot off yesterday. Um, so yeah, that's going to be a problem. But part of it too is just learning to know your body and let it heal and not be an idiot. So that's part of being
It's
fit,
tough. No,
right?
it's
Yeah,
tough to take time off, especially whenever you know what it's like to whenever you know what you're facing and what can happen to your body and all of that. It's tough. I'm sorry, man.
yeah. Thank you. But yeah, definitely more motivation to re-engage the diet, track food, so I don't, because I'm not gonna be able to do a lot of extra stuff.
Yeah, that
So
doesn't
that'll
sound
have to
fun. That
be
doesn't
key.
sound fun at all.
That'll have to be key.
It's never watching the food is never it's never fun. It's never enjoyable. It's
No.
never as exciting as putting up a new PR on the bench or
Yeah.
rocking a deadlift. It just yeah. I mean the payoff is probably 5 to 10 times as good as any of those things. If you do it well and do it right, but it's not enjoyable.
No, it's not fun.
Unless you're like a masochist and you just enjoy self-inflicted pain. There's some people out there that just enjoy, causing themselves grief and trauma, and that they can do those eating plans
That's
and
true.
diets well, and there are other folks who just they don't crave anything, or their metabolism is so high. I hate them. They're going to hell.
Oh
You
yeah,
know?
yeah. We all know someone who eats everything we eat
Yeah,
but never gains a pound.
yeah. Yeah, genetics. It's
But
sad.
how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. It's been a rough week. We have an offer on a house. We're about to put an offer on another house. I think both of those are going to fall through, and so the
Bummer.
stress level in my house and my life are high. Stress is never good. Inflammation is never good. Though it does drive me to work out, it also just it just messes with your body, with your systems, with your sleep. So it is tough to keep the head in the game with fitness and nutrition, but I've got this coach that I have to send my weight to and all. So I have buckled down a little bit more. I've been a scoop of Nutella here. Uh, you know, some of my favorites, candy corn and pumpkins, are out now. So a little few pieces of those there, and I've not really been honest about what I'm eating with the trainer. So this week I was like, I'm gonna buckle down. I'm gonna do it well. I'm gonna let the numbers be what they be. So I'm gonna recommit there. But then there's just no energy to work out. It feels like it's one or the other. Like I can do the fitness and the training and the workout. And hit that, and then the nutrition just isn't great. Or I can hit the nutrition and just be like laser focused on
Yeah.
that, but then just the motivation, to get to the gym and to put in hard is there. And so, all of this to say, like, I commit now to doing this, to just being a teetotaler this week and hopefully next week with the nutrition. But then my trainer comes at the same time and it's like, why don't you video a few of your large movements in order to send to me so I can see what you're lifting and how you're lifting? I'm like, come on. Like, the 1 week where I have zero motivation, I have zero strength, I don't even really want to go and lift anything at the gym. Like, you're asking me to record myself doing it and send it to you. Just it's like funny. That this was not the week to do that, so I'm just not doing it. And I'm hoping that I don't think he watches this, and even if he does, I'm hoping he doesn't make it all the way through here to the end. But I'm just sorry, I'm not doing it. I'm maybe next week, we'll see, but it's not looking good either.
Yeah, I watched a podcast.
I paid you, so I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, I watched a podcast while I was laying down with my broken ankle and on fitness, and they were interviewing somebody who does a lot of bodybuilding, like your journey, and it's on CrossFit. And he was saying, like, it's hard to find a sustainable model, and he expressed this similar things, like, it's like when you're leaning up, it's not fun, it's not sustainable. Like, you have to eat, and then you have no energy to lift, and then but you can't just eat like a crazy person. Or you become unhealthy that way. So he's like, you just have to find a balance. So I appreciated that because, it's high level fitness, high level whatever dieting is not sustainable and probably unhealthy.
No, it's fascinating, man. I mean, I'm still losing weight, but I'm losing weight at the rate of like a quarter pound to a pound a week. Like, it's uber slow. And some weeks it's like, it's zero, but I continue to see changes physically. And so it's just, I've never been in a situation where it's like, you're really just not losing weight, but your body is changing. And that's like super weird. It just, it messes with my mind because I want to see that number on the scale go down. But just so tied to that idea of a number on a scale being a reflection of what I look like physically, just breaking that in my head, even for somebody, who knows as much as I do, is just almost impossible to do. And to go back to the theology, I think that's so much that happens, with pastors and with churches, is it's so hard to break these misconceptions and these ideas about what we think, do this and this yields this, and that's a healthy thing to do and the right thing to do. It's almost impossible to break that, even when we're really trying to do it. And that's what's experiencing with me in fitness. I'm seeing the changes, but I'm saying there's just no way that's right, because my mind is so set in this, weight equals positive or negative depending on where it is on the scale.
Yeah, it's good. All
right, man. Well,
all right.
We're way over time, so I guess go and hobble your way to lunch or whatever. I'm sorry, I should have made a joke. No, I'm not sorry. I'll
be hobbling.
All right, see you next week, man.
All right, take care, man.